Right now, on the books, we've always had the rule that if we can catch a tenant putting out on the wrong date, they can be fined. The thing is, you have to prove it. So, they open bags, they see if they find a bill in there or something, and that will continue. If we catch a tenant red-handed, they can be fined, and that won't change. But we're adding, making owners, especially, big landlords, responsible. We're adding that to the mix.
Dan Delmar and for Elias, that's Councillor Peter McQueen explaining some of the rules regarding garbage being left out and who is responsible. I do remember, again, when I was a housing reporter back in the day, I went on a ride-along with a garbage inspector, okay? I just insisted. I was like, we have to know what you guys are doing. I wanted to spend the whole day with this woman. She's very generous, and we did the circuit with her the whole day. And no red flags at all. Did her job very well, very professionally, except for one. There was one instance that kind of blew my mind, and that was when she took out like an X-Acto knife or something and started opening all the bags to look for addresses, to look for clues. She was doing an investigation, looking for clues to see who owned the bag. The bag which may have been out too early, maybe had stuff in it that wasn't supposed to, maybe it was clear instead of black, and so they would take a little X-Acto knife, open up the bag, rifle through the garbage. Go to the bottom of the garbage can, put away all the scuzzy stuff, the banana peels, and then come out with a bill or something where they would go, aha, I've got my culprit. And that to me sounded crazy. Like it seemed crazy to me at the time. Now the debate is who's going to pay the price for this garbage, whether it's left out improperly, a day early, whatever. Stephanie Valenzuela is an Ensemble Montreal city councillor. She represents the Darlington district. Is this the way stuff works, Stephanie? Essentially, is this how we catch people in Montreal who put the garbage out early by rifling through their garbage, looking for their address?
First of all, thank you for having me. Honestly, I think this approach is quite short-sighted because, as you probably know, not a lot of people receive their mail anymore with their address. A lot of things are done online. So to open up a bunch of bags that are on the street or on the public domain when it's not the appropriate time doesn't guarantee that you're going to find the actual culprit. And it doesn't also guarantee that you're going to target repeat offenders and that it will change their behavior afterwards. So, I understand that the city is probably overwhelmed with the amount of complaints that they've been receiving in the last 4 years about cleanliness and the cleanliness on public domain. But this policy that they're trying to implement or put in place, I don't think, and we don't think in Ensemble Montreal, is actually going to improve the state of our city when it comes to cleanliness.
So here the city, correct me if I'm wrong, wants to start charging or fining the owners of buildings for improperly managed garbage. Now, what happens, because if a lot of tenants sort of put their garbage in a garbage chute and then it goes down a chute, it goes into a bin, whatever, is that garbage still the tenant's responsibility or does it become then the owner, the manager's responsibility?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to emphasize the fact that it's everyone's responsibility, whether it's a tenant or a landlord, or collectively, we're all responsible for the cleanliness of our city and the cleanliness in front of our homes. But at the end of the day, your trash is your responsibility as a tenant. And that's why I think this measure is quite difficult to implement, because not only can you detect who is the culprit in terms of putting out the trash incorrectly, but also it doesn't address like illegal dumping. I'm a councillor for the district of Darlington, where it's a very densely populated district. There's a lot of apartment buildings, and even sometimes you have landlords that are trying to be responsible and that really are trying to educate their tenants, but you don't know exactly who is dumping the trash in front of their building. Is it from their building, or is it a passerby? Is it someone from another building that didn't throw their trash at the right time, so they want to put it off to somebody else's responsibility? So it's very difficult, once again, to implement this rule and also to find out who is responsible for repeating the offense and how do we address that in order for them to learn their lesson and hopefully comply with the rules in place.
And what do you think the system should be like? I mean, should it be the tenants or landlord's responsibility?
Well, I think that each borough is quite different, right? I think that in the city of Montreal, we have 19 boroughs and there's complexities in each borough. If I could give the example of my colleague's borough in Outremont, In the last 3 years, they've been able to reduce their complaints by 60%. How did they do that? Well, they changed a lot of their policies. They implemented closed bin policies. They added an additional inspector in order to, reduce the complaints and speak to the landlords and to the property owners that might have had some issues. So that's something that needs to be looked at. We can look at the borough of MHM in the East End, and they changed their rules, and they have garbage pickup every 2 weeks. And we've seen that since they've changed those rules, there's been drastic amounts of complaints. There's so many articles and interviews done by individuals that are saying we even now see rats more frequently on the streets because of this change. So I think that it's really important now that we analyze where are the issues in each borough. Is it an issue of having more bins? Is it an issue of having closed bins? Do we need to change the frequency of our garbage collection? I think that's really where the city needs to play its role into keeping, a good quality of life for its citizens.
I get that. Certainly there's a lot of systemic tweaks that may have to be made, but just on the broad principle, what do you think in apartment buildings and multi-residential facilities, who is responsible just fundamentally? Do you believe it's the tenant or the landlord?
I believe individually we all have a role to play, but as well the landlords can play a role in maybe with the city educating the tenants on what day you really have to throw the garbage, where do you have to place it.
Right.
But in all of this, you can't just point the finger onto one person and say it's one person's responsibility. It's not just the landlord's responsibility, it's the tenant's responsibility. And the city also needs to do its job in being exemplary in how they also maintain their public domain. You can't blame tenants or blame landlords if they go to a park and they see that garbage is overfilling and sometimes trash is not being picked up. We all collectively have a role to play to keep our city clean.
But often, you say it's everyone's responsibility, but it's not. It's just not sometimes. Sometimes the tenant is doing everything right. Sometimes the landlord is doing everything wrong. Or conversely, sometimes the tenants are not disposing of their garbage correctly and the landlords are. So,
yeah.
Ultimately, what's a court supposed to do if this goes further, if there's a dispute about this, and if the city of Montreal under Ensemble Montreal is arguing, well, everyone's responsible, what are we supposed to do with that? What's the court supposed to do? And can't you just make someone responsible?
Well, I also would like to add the fact that sometimes you have tenants and you have landlords throwing the trash at the right time, but the city doesn't pick it up, and we'd have to send back our employees to go pick it up because for some reason it was forgotten. So there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. And again, we have to go back to what are the systemic issues or what are the different issues that depend on the borough. But I really think that there's also a lot of work that needs to be done on educating and sensitizing people as to, again, you go back to right now we're talking about trash, but you talk about composting, for example, only a third of Montrealers know how to compost properly and what are the benefits of composting. If we were educating everyone on how to properly recycle, how to properly compost, we wouldn't have the issues that we have with trash at this moment. So it's I understand it's a complex file, but it's a file that implicates everyone's, involvement and engagement. And right now the city really has to play its role in leading by example, but also putting the tools that we need in order to have a really clean city, like having closed garbage bins, having more cendrier to put, your cigarette butts, for example, on the public domain. These things can also help to lead by example and to show that maybe you shouldn't throw your coffee cup on the ground because, hey, there's a bin there and it's closed and it won't fly because of the wind and it won't end up on somebody's front lawn.
So I don't want to harp on it, but I think there's just a lot of confusion as to what the rules are currently under Projet Montréal and what the rules would be if you want to change things under Ensemble. So if a tenant throws out their garbage, they put it down the garbage chute. And they, for that tenant, for most people, a normal person would say, well, that's I'm done. I'm done in the process. That's my obligation. It goes to the landlord. It goes to their bins. It's their responsibility to take it out, put it onto the curb. I have nothing to do with that. But today, if your garbage bag is improperly, if the landlord makes a mistake, for instance, and an inspector comes by, rifles through your garbage, finds your address, you could be fined, but you didn't even do anything wrong, right?
Yeah. Well,
so, what's the solution here?
So it is quite confusing how it's being presented at this moment because, for example, depending as well on the borough, if you have an inspector that goes through the garbage and it's the bin of the of the landlord of the building itself. I mean, if it's out at the wrong time, but it's your trash that's there with your number and your information, it's quite confusing as to who receives the fine at this moment. Is it the landlord or is it the tenant if it's your personal information that's there? So I think that there has to be, going back to emphasize my point, education is really important right now. I think everybody needs to understand very clearly what is our role and responsibility and what are the consequences if we don't follow the rules, right? And because of the lack of clarity on all of that, I think that everybody is just like in a free-for-all. It's like the far west in the city of Montreal when it comes to cleanliness at this point, which also explains why in the last 3 years, the complaints in the city have increased by 49%, which is extremely worrying. And I think it's because of this that the Projet Montréal administration is going to such extreme and say, okay, let's give the fines to the landlords because they're in over their head with the amount of complaints they're getting in the city of Montreal. But again, it's not a targeted measure, and it doesn't guarantee that the repeat offenders are going to change their behavior, and it doesn't also address, for example, illegal dumping.
Yeah.
So again, I think that we need to do a hard evaluation and go and look at each borough and look at what are the complexities there, what are the obstacles, what needs to be changed, what needs to be refined. And I think that another good example of a borough that has really done this well is the Saint Laurent borough, that since 2016 has trash pickup every 2 weeks, but you've never heard a complaint about that change in 2016 in the Saint Laurent borough in the same way that you've heard complaints in MHM. It's because they really accompanied their residents through the process. They gave them options depending on, their family size in order to choose the bins that are appropriate for them and their standard of living. So I think you have to have a really particular approach by understanding the needs of your residents and the obstacles in your borough.
Okay, thanks very much. Stephanie Valenzuela, Ensemble Montreal councillor for Darlington. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.